When we look at some of the big toy lines with action figures, most of the time they'll come with their own accessories. Of course, sometimes those accessories are reused, and we'll see them interchanged a few times. When it comes to a budget toy line such as the core, it's complicated, but it didn't start that way. The vintage line of core figures came with their own respective weapons, and the vehicles, they would be interchangeable. The weapons even had names on the side of the packaging early in the game. Eventually, the information would drop entirely from the packaging, but those figures would still have a lot of the same weapons that they came with before. The concept of individualized weapons was completely gone. This happened when the classic O-ring figures were retired. They would be replaced by the softer plastic T-crotch figures known as the Core Commando Force. The Commando Force would later become the Core Special Forces, but it would still have the same weapons as the Commando Force. The weapons for these figures were molded in all black and looked like they could be real-world weapons. The Core Special Forces would get a makeover using old bodies with new heads, and this would become the Core New Recruits. Along with the new heads, the new recruits would also make it clear which characters were good and which were evil. During the early days of the new recruits, the figures would come with the same weapons that came with the special forces. But eventually, the weapons would change and be more futuristic. Along with the new storyline, there was also a comic book that would see one issue released, and there would be a dossier for each character. The early dossiers would say what were a character's accessories along with the accessory name. Eventually, this would be dropped and all the weapons would become a free-for-all again, but not for all of the characters. Another thing that we would get would be the weapons trees. Now these trees were molded weapons that were, well, still in the sprue kit. Now these are very reminiscent of the 90s G.I. Joes or model kits. Now something that would come with this specific weapons tree was a figure stand. Now this figure stand had some dirt detail and it looks great. It actually doesn't work very well with these figures, but it actually works great with the vintage line. After the first initial run of the Core New Recruits, more characters would come into play along with new bodies. These bodies would come with their own weapons and the feature known as wearable weapons. This brought back the idea that each figure had their own respective weapon. Some of these bodies would be used on more than one character. The new figures included Spade and Road Rash, Boulder, Rain and Mirage. Boulder didn't share his body, but he did have his own weapons that fit the figure. The other new figure in the line, Decoder, would not include any wearable weapons, but his weapon was clearly the arm blades, which were introduced during this time. After the new recruits, the line was changed to Total Soldier. During this line, many characters were dropped, but there were still different teams. Total Soldier did not have anyone to fight, nor did they have any dossiers. The core Total Soldier brought things back to where they were during Special Forces. The weapons were still a free-for-all, but at least they released 4 new figures. I mean, that sounds like a great idea. Unfortunately, the new figures were very limited when they came to articulation, and it included the least articulated figure in the entire core toy line, Reaper. These 4 figures would be dubbed the Craptastic 4 by myself and Dan Classic. With these 4 new figures, there were 4 new sets of weapons. Personally, I like to keep each set of weapon to each of the figures, but with no way of knowing who got what during this time, The only figures to have the obvious weapons were Rain, Decoder, and Spade. And all three of them, they were just recolors from the previous line. After the Call of Duty inspired Total Soldier line, the Corps had a bit of a facelift. The line was now called the Corps Elite. During this time, the dossiers came back, along with a new storyline and new characters. Once again, we had a hint of who got what in some of these dossiers. For example, Dozer, who was produced during the Total Soldier line, was now
bazooka obsessed.
And obviously, since he's a bazooka nut, he had the bazooka as his weapon. Now, we did get some old characters come back, and that was kinda cool. One interesting character was Recoil, who was also produced during the Total Soldier line. But his first appearance was during Commando Force. In his Elite dossier, it says that he has dual pistols, which he comes with. During Commando Force, he was also packaged with dual guns as well, so this could be a nod to the package of the old line. Something else that's interesting is that Rain has a body swap, but not completely. His head and his legs remain the same from New Recruits and Total Soldier. His torso actually comes from Spade and Road Rash. The weapons he comes with are Spade and Road Rash's grappling hook and knife, while his pistol comes from his first incarnation, which fits in his leg holster. The Corps Elite reintroduced characters from the previous lines. Some of these characters had head swaps and repaints. But the biggest thing about this line was the introduction of the first two female characters, Snakebite and Puma. These two figures have very different articulation and their own set of weapons. These two characters also stirred a little bit of controversy, but that's for another video. Near the end of the series, there was a teaser about having a new type of weapons tree. It says the Corps and Weapons Locker. This also has a handle and some kind of fencing. With Lanard toys growing, they obtained a license to make toys for Kong Skull Island. This toy line would reuse Corps bodies and weapons. There were two new head sculpts representing Samuel L. Jackson and Tom Hiddleston. Tom Hiddleston's body was the same one as Rain, which meant that he came with the grappling hook, the knife, and the pistol. Now these weapons are exactly the same, they're just in different colored plastic. In 2018, Lanard Toys got the license to make toys for the video game inspired movie Rampage. After Snakebite and Puma were a big hit, Lanard decided to bring more figures with the same ball joint articulation as the girls. One of those figures was the protagonist of Rampage, David Okoye, played by Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Along with the new articulation came new weapons. Now, along with the new weapons, we also got a new weapons tree. This weapons tree was molded in gold plastic. All the tips of the weapons have orange paint on them. Now, the gold plastic is not like the gold plastic of the 80s and 90s, so it won't have GPS or gold plastic syndrome, which makes gold weapons brittle. We also got a new backpack that can hold a rifle, which can enhance the wearable weapons feature of a figure. This would be a huge step since previously there was no backpack that can do this. Along with Davis Okoye, there are 6 more Corps figures released with the same ball joint articulation. 4 of these 6 figures share the same body type. Titan and El Jefe share the same body type. The other 2 figures would be Shrapnel and Trickshot. Impact and Smoke would have their own body type that they're not sharing with any other figures as of this video. As with the new recruits Spade and Road Rash or Rain and Mirage, El Jefe and Titan would share the same weapons. That also goes for Trickshot and Shrapnel. While Impact and Smoke have their own unique accessories that fit their bodies. And this would be because of the wearable weapons feature. Impact actually has a hole on his back that his baton fits in. El Jefe and Titan have a holster on their chest for their revolver. Then they have a sheath on their leg for their knife. Even though the Corps' weapons are interchangeable between characters, it would seem that there are some body parts that will always have the same weapons that come with them. We saw this with Rain version 4, where his torso came with a grappling hook and knife, the same one that came with the original characters of these torsos, Spade and Road Rash. While the legs that originally came with Rain and Mirage came with Rain and Mirage's gun. About half the time, you won't see the same weapons being packaged with some characters. Sometimes, they are just there. So to have a complete Corps figure doesn't always mean that you have to have a weapon. That is, unless you're talking about the vintage line or any figure with the wearable weapons feature. I hope this was helpful in understanding the core and their accessories. If there was something I missed or got wrong, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. If you liked the video, please give it a like. If you'd like to see more toy reviews like this, then please subscribe to my channel. I also have a Facebook page and Instagram where I post behind the scenes stuff and other goodies. Both of these are under Raz Holly. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.